Hi, my name is Keegan, and I'm the founder of Joiner Services, and this is Engineers in Automation. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with Travis Weber of Lincoln Electric. He's a sales engineer and weld engineer for them, and we're going to talk about his role within the automation industry. Now, let's go talk automation. All right, and we're back, and we're here today with Travis Weber, weld engineer, sales engineer for Lincoln Electric. Travis, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on today. Could you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a technical rep, weld engineer, sales engineer for Lincoln Electric in Southwest Ohio, Southeast Indiana, and Northern Kentucky. Been with the company going on 9 years. Have covered a couple different territories across the country, and previous to that was an intern at John Deere and Case IH prior to that, and then like you, kind of got started at Ferris State up in Big Rapids, Michigan.
Yes, sir.
It's just been writing the story ever since.
Yeah, great. And then how did you get into welding, right? What drew you to Ferris State? How did you jump into this industry?
So the thing that drew me to industry or to welding, excuse me, is I grew up on a farm, and so when things break, right, it's all steel, it's heavy steel, and it's got to be welded back together. And watching my dad and my grandpa weld, I was like, man, that's kind of cool, right? So next thing you know, they're like, well, you try it, see what you think, right? So I really enjoyed it. And in Traverse City, Michigan, where I grew up, there was a Traverse Bay Area Career Tech Center, and they had a 2 year, high school welding program. So
That's great.
started there, and my welding instructor was extremely supportive. I actually worked for him in the evenings at his own shop, and he
Wow.
was like, "Look, man, what do you want to do with welding?" As a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, I didn't know. And he's like, well, there's this school south of here, like 2 hours, and they have a welding engineering program. You should check it out.
Wow, that path that you just described sounds so similar to mine. I had the same sort of experience with a professor or I guess teacher from high school that kind of pushed me towards the weld program and yeah, changed my life for the better.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was lost, right? I wasn't a big fan of school, like
Yeah.
most guys in the trades and want to work with their hands. And um, he was like, look, you got a good head on your shoulders, like maybe push it to the next level. And I'm easily goaded into things like, hey, let's push it to the next level. And in this
Yeah.
instance, the next level was college. He's like,
Right.
look, you don't just because you go for a semester doesn't mean you have to commit for 4 years or even like the 2 year welding technology program. He's like, just go try it out. If it's not for you, you gain some life experience,
Yep.
and then you can come back and restart in a different direction. So um, by the time the first semester was over, I wasn't coming home. Right, I
You
was
were
ready to
hooked. So was I.
I was ready to go the distance.
Yeah, great, great. And then how did you kind of after graduation then kind of move into industrial automation? How did you go into this industry?
So when I came to Lincoln, we're part of my role is really anything that has a Lincoln Electric sticker on it for the most part, and so that's safety gear, that's welding equipment, that's welding consumables, MIG, TIG, stick, flux core, sub arc, plasma cutting, automation, semi-automatic, handheld, hard automation, and over time, I just have developed more of an interest in the automated side, whether it's robotic automation or some sort of mechanized hard automation. But
Yeah.
I think that that's something that I enjoy, and as the world kind of continues to change, um, I think that that's something we're going to rely on more and more, and not just in the welding world, but in all aspects, material handling. We keep seeing these news stories about uh, automated vehicles, right? Self-driving cars, self-driving trucks. I think automation is kind of the way of the future, and it happens that I enjoy automation, and so why not just keep pushing that direction
Yeah.
to see what I come up with?
Absolutely. And then sort of what are some of your kind of day-to-day automation projects that you're working on?
So where automation's concerned, and it's not every day, but where automation's concerned, a lot of it is working with our quote team, to find um, to get a quote put together for an end user that I've been working with. That's like, hey, we're short on people. our production volumes are increasing, whatever. Like, hey, is automation a viable solution? Yep, it is. So let's talk about it. Let's figure out, do you need a back-to-back? Do you need a side-by-side? Do you need single arm, dual arm, headstock, tailstock, Ferris wheel, H-frame? What is it that you need? And then get with our quoting team, get the quote put together, get it over the end user, and then get, kind of the next step is to get some of their parts, maybe send up to our lab, weld those parts out, prove it out that we can do it, get some cycle time estimates, some things like that. Let them, for first time automation users, let them do destructive testing, non-destructive testing, cut and etch, whatever they need to do to say, yeah, this is as good as the parts that my guys or my gals are making. So that's part of what I do on the sales side, but then on the supporting side, and I'm by no means an expert, but I'm not afraid to grab a teach pen and make adjustments, right? Whether it's, reprogramming positions or, and I'm not an automation expert. I would say that I'm more of a welding expert. So if I can get paired with one of the automation specialists at wherever it is, they can kind of handle some of the robot manipulation. And then I handle that magic red box kind of on the back of the robot that's handling the welds. So it's probably 2 days a week, part of my responsibility right now, and hoping in the future to make that a 5-day a week, kind of a full responsibility and leave some of the other stuff behind.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads into my next question is, being responsible for that red box there. I'm sure, and I've noticed on your LinkedIn that you're doing a lot of weld training as well. Can you kind of talk to us about that? How does one, how do you get involved with that? If that's something that you're interested in, or are you doing it for your customers? Can you just describe a little bit about the training?
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that we support, right, as part of our product offering, as part of our value add. And I've got a welding background. I've been in and out of the industry, and then of course have the Lincoln background, so I can support those products that have that red box with the Lincoln sticker on the side. My goal is to be able to take the end user, whoever it may be, whether it's yourself or Joe's Fab Shop or big time automotive supplier XYZ, right? But want to be able to make them successful, right? So one of the things, because they've got 100 things going on, right, that they're responsible for. But if I can take some of my time to teach them, more about the welding process, the equipment that they're using, the different wires, right? Y035 versus 045 or Y045 versus 035. It's, and I had somebody one time ask me like, well, what if you train yourself out of a job? First off, I highly doubt that that's going to happen. Because while, people learn from training, they're probably never going to become proficient enough that they don't ever reach out for help. So it's actually something that I enjoy. And that moment when you're working with somebody and you're explaining things and all of a sudden you see the light bulb come on, right? That's very fulfilling.
And it's only going to help. Yeah, it's only going to help you too, right? I mean, the more that your clients know about your system, the better it is for you that you can make that quick call and say, oh, remember during this part of the class, you need to do this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're your biggest allies, I would think, once you train them up.
Yeah, I mean, from a sales and engineering standpoint, right? If they're happy with the product they have, they know the ins and outs of it, they know that they're getting good support when they need it. Why consider other options or why? And not that they shouldn't, but why would you take a hard look at somebody else if you're happy with what you got?
Yep, absolutely. That's a great point. So on that note, then, could you tell me a couple of the things that you really like about the industrial automation industry?
And this sounds super childish, but right off the gate, like I just think robots are cool.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're looking at a piece of steel kind of set there with a bunch of servos attached to it, and you're holding the teach pendant that's not much bigger than some of today's cell phones, and you can make that thing do, whatever you want it to do within the limits of that machine. But repeatability, right? It does the same thing over and over again, and it does it at a speed that we as humans we have no way to be able to do that. And it's just such again, cool thing. And I also like the neat, maybe neatness isn't the right word, right? But you get a robot cell set up, and it doesn't need all these extra things, right? It's taking parts in, giving you parts out. It's just a very streamlined, it's very efficient, typically, if set up right, process. And the engineer in me mixed with a little bit of OCD really likes that kind of streamlined process. And therefore I enjoy, spending the time with the automation side.
Absolutely. And I always kind of relate it to my friends who aren't in the industry. It's almost like you get to program robots is similar to like playing video games, right? You get to go out
Yeah.
there and you almost are building Legos, and it's with video games, and that's like the easiest way to explain to somebody that's not in the industry.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look, I get to build these things, and then I also get to kind of play around with this teach pendant, and the robot does stuff that I tell it to do, and yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. And again, just going back to being like a little kid, man, I think it's cool to see see them in their natural element, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then with that, what are some things that you would change about the industry, the automation industry?
Oh man, that's a good one. Um, there's a ton of people that I've met with over the years, and we've talked about automation every year for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And they're like, well, I just don't know. And man, I wish that there was say that again.
The hesitancy.
Yeah, the hesitancy. And look, automation is not inexpensive, right? You have to shell out a bunch of money up front, but typically there's an ROI.
Yep.
If there's not an ROI, you probably shouldn't be buying automation unless you just got more money than you know what to do with. But typically there's an ROI. I wish that more people would, when they see the ROI, right, they've had parts welded out, they know that an automated system can do what they want. I wish they would take that leap of faith, because I think inevitably it would help their business.
Yep.
Right? Because it frees up people for other responsibilities. It allows faster production of the parts that you're already making, right? And typically once you get one in and kind of get accustomed to it, then you start thinking, you're like, wow, we can put this on there, or we can put this on there, or we can do this with it. Or,
yep.
Hey, if we had a little bit bigger system, or instead of a headstock, tailstock, if we had, an H-frame where we could be loading and unloading. I mean, it just continues to grow, and their mind starts to change more and more, and they focus on that automation and how it can help their business be more profitable. Yeah. So if more people would just be willing to, again, assuming everything checks out, the ROI is there, the funds are there.
Yeah.
If they were willing to pull the trigger, that's what I would like to see change in the automation industry.
And with that too, have you seen some changes from like your typical standard industrial size robot to maybe cobots? Have you seen much of that?
Yeah, and I think there's two driving factors. That a cobot is a significantly smaller investment, so it's a little easier to stomach, especially if you're a small, maybe medium-sized welding shop. 80 to 100 grand is a lot easier to bite off than 180 to 200,000, right?
Yep.
And I know that you've done robot programming, and probably a lot of folks that are watching this, but you get into some of the back menus, and all of a sudden you can get very, very, very lost if you hit the wrong button. And then you're calling somebody like me or somebody with more expertise, going, hey, and I'm just going to use this as an example. I had a customer that somehow got into their IOs and turned the anti-spatter spray on. So anytime they touch the dead man switch or hit cycle start, the anti-spatter would just spray uncontrollably, right?
Oh, wow.
So, cobots have helped simplify that a lot of the touch to teach. The cobot that I have here in Mason for demos and exploratory use, a lot of drag and drop, right? It's basically a Samsung tablet, and you take whatever move. Is it a weld move? Is it an air move? Is it a joint move versus linear? Is it an arc start, an arc end? Is it a circular move, right? And you just drag and drop as you create your program, and then you physically grab your arm and move it to wherever it is that you want it.
Yeah.
So you still need that teach pendant for the overall control, but you're not driving it, right? You can physically manipulate that arm to whatever position you need to get into a groove or to do a fillet or whatever. So I think it's helping simplify things, and I think that the lower cost is much more appealing to some of the smaller facilities.
And are you seeing some of the same repeatabilities that you'd see with your standard industrial size?
Yeah. Again, the little asterisk there, right? A lot of times with industrial automation or dedicated automation cells, you've got $150,000 robot, and then maybe you've got $20,000 or $25,000 in the tooling, or maybe more, right? Depending on how complex your tooling is. Well, on a cobot, maybe you've got a little bit less intricate fixture, and as long as your fixture is as good as the parts you're feeding in, it's not an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And then what are some of the maybe have you seen some of the lightweight materials come into play a little bit more? I know there's a lot of regulations now regarding CO2 emissions for vehicles and gas mileage. Have you seen a lot of new materials for lightweighting purposes?
Yeah, and I'm again as we move forward, I'm hoping to get more into some of that. So I've got some limited experience, but it's crazy to think of the thickness and before I started working in the automotive industry, you start thinking about a car frame and you're like, man, what the chassis is made out of like 1/4 inch, right? Or no, and then now that I'm in this industry, I don't know that there's hardly anything on my truck that's sitting in the garage that's a 1/4 inch, at least not in thickness. And yeah, obviously with internal combustion, right, gas or diesel engines, lightweighting is a big deal, trying to get the miles per gallon up. But now with some of the regulations and the way things are going with these battery vehicles, these electric vehicles, you have things like regenerative braking. Well, you need weight to help with regenerative braking. So we're at a point where I think the industry is going to start to split a little bit, and you're going to have folks that are still working on lightweighting, right? How do we get a Ford pickup truck to 30 miles to the gallon? Can we get the weight down more? But then on the other hand, you're going to have folks that are maybe not trying to add weight, but they're not really interested in lightweighting either, because they need that weight for the benefits of the electric vehicle.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, a lot of people aren't thinking about that. That's a really good point. Yeah. So another question I've got is, everyone has them, mistakes. What kind of mistakes have you ran into? How'd you fix it? How'd you overcome it? Or do you have any current issues right now that you can talk about?
Well, I would love to tell you that I don't make mistakes and that I can't answer your question, but that would probably be a lie. There's not really any that stick out. I will say when I was first getting into automation, and it wasn't maybe so much a mistake as a bluff, right? I told a guy like, well, I can do anything with this robot that you need done. Some time went back and forth, and we've been working together, and he was like, all right, well, here's what I need. And I was just like, oh, well, I can't do that. But I didn't want to let him know that I wasn't capable. So, I'm basically earbuds in, teach pen in hand, working through it. And there were some complexities that really needed more than just a walkthrough, right? I needed somebody there that had some skills. And so I actually told the guy like, hey, I've got a kind of an emergency I got to go take care of. Like, I'll come back in a couple of days. We'll get this figured out. And so I brought a guy in with me to fix the situation. And I started to tell the guy, I was like, hey, like, he's one of our trainees. Like, I'm just showing him the ropes. It very quickly became obvious that the guy was not a trainee. Yeah. He was bailing me out. And the guy called me on it and was like, look, man, like, if you didn't know, you didn't know. You should have just told me.
Yeah.
So
that was a good strategy, though. I mean, by knowing that you couldn't do it yourself, that you needed help, and realizing that quickly, letting the customer know, though, and coming back. So I still like how you resolved it. Maybe it could have been done a little bit differently, but no, still got the results that you needed. So that's good.
And it was very humbling, right? Because I was like, well, I could do this, right? It's not a big deal. And then I couldn't do it, and I needed help. And thankfully there was good people on my team that were able to help me out and take care of what needed to be taken care of. But I went from I can do that, that's no problem, to well, let's take a look at it. kind of mentality, and never really saying right out of the gate, like, yes, that's no problem, because things come up. Even in the automation world where everything is very regimented, right? That robot, when you hit that cycle start button, it should be doing the exact same thing it's done for the last 40,000 cycles, but things happen, right? Somebody got in there to change a weld parameter and deleted a line in your program, and now it tries to go, there's a fixture here, the robot's welding here, and it misses the air move, and it just, right? Yep. Next thing you know, you got a broken neck, there's water going everywhere. You're like, oh, yep. Something went wrong.
Seen that one too many times. But yeah, great analogy there. I guess another great question that I always like to ask is, especially somebody like yourself who's been in the industry now over 10 years and has all this knowledge, where do you go to learn? They're constantly learning in the industry, but is there somewhere you go to learn more about welding, more about automation? Where do you go to learn?
And the guys that I'm going to reference here, I'm going to call them gray hairs, and they're going to get mad at me for that because they're not much older than I am, but they do have a few more gray hairs. And honestly, YouTube's a great reference, and there's videos out there, and certainly you can call the corporate offices of all the major automation companies, but there are guys in the industry that have so much knowledge because they've done so much. Basically, keep those guys on speed dial. I reach out on a regular basis. I'm proud to say that it's becoming less and less frequent, right, as I absorb some of that knowledge. But, they've seen it and they've done it and they've tried it. I mean, they've got more years working with automation than I have in the industry. So, their knowledge level is so high. It's just like, man. And so, and it builds the relationship, right? Like those guys initially were business partners or coworkers, and they become friends, right? One of the guys that I rely on pretty regularly, he and I had talked. He's a hunter, I'm a hunter. We talked about hunting for a long time, and he and I actually ended up going to Montana elk hunting last year, right? Oh, right. So you never know of those guys and those relationships that you use on a professional level. How is that going to be? What will that do to your personal life either? So
yeah, that's great.
But there's truly resources everywhere, and there's always good people that want to teach the younger generations, myself, and even the high school students or college students now that will teach you more about their craft and the things that they do.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And then just to kind of wrap up here, do you have any words of inspiration? Is there anything that you can kind of wrap up this interview with? Leadership advice?
Well, I'm probably not qualified to give leadership advice, but words of encouragement or if you're interested in automation, is just get out there and do it, right? If you're a young professional or a student and it interests you, go get on YouTube, learn more about it. Talk to your local career tech or your local vocational school or skilled trades facilities and say, hey, what kind of automation programs do you have? And if you don't want to go the education route, get into a facility that has automation and say, hey, I'm willing to start whatever role you need, but my real interest is that robot that's over there in the corner. Yeah. So can we put together some sort of a plan where in a year or 6 months or whatever the time frame is that I'm doing more with that and grow your skills from there. Yeah. I've got several large
out there. That's for
sure.
Sure.
Man, the jobs are everywhere. And I've got several large automotive customers that have kind of their own apprenticeship program for their robot techs, right? And you're going to learn robots, you're going to learn industrial automation, you're going to learn PLCs, you're going to learn programming, welding, everything in between. Oh, and by the way, we're going to pay you pretty darn good money while you do. I think, and where I grew up in northern Michigan, we didn't have a lot of that. And I think had I known about that or been, that had been more readily available, I probably would have gone that route over, going to Ferris. And not that I regret going to Ferris, just I know what my mindset was at that time, and that paid apprenticeship program would have spoken to me in volumes. So, my advice is where automation is concerned is just go get it. There's so many opportunities in automation right now, not only related to welding, but in all aspects. Go get them.
Oh, it's great advice. Great advice. And let me ask, where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
Pretty much, I'm a LinkedIn guy. I like the professionalism, I guess, of the LinkedIn platform.
Yeah, me too.
That's kind of where I hang out.
Okay, awesome.
So,
Well, thanks for being on, and we hope that all the guests today enjoyed the show. So give us a like, a comment, a share, and don't forget to subscribe. And we look forward to having you join us next time here on Engineers in Automation. Thanks.